Okay, so up next we have a session continuing from Professor Ghose's session. It's on mobile marketing and location-based marketing. May I take this opportunity to invite on stage Mr. Sridhar Iyer, Head of Digital and Innovation, Citibank, India. Mr. Iyer is a senior banker with a wide range of experience in the areas of e-business, digital payments, and strategic marketing. He was one of the key members of the team that set up Citibank India's online banking and e-commerce business in 1999. Over the last decade, Sridhar has been responsible for growing the e-businesses for multinational banks, including Citi and Lloyds Banking Group in the UK and in Europe. Sridhar has extensive international experience, particularly in Europe, and has undertaken a variety of strategic e-business roles on a global mandate. Welcome, Sridhar. Our second speaker for the session is Mr. Anuj Kumar, co-founder and managing director, Affle. Mr. Anuj was among the first to join the Affle founding team beginning 2006, while the company was in early stages of inception. Serving as the executive director for South Asia region, Anuj played a pivotal role in building and growing Affle. Prior to co-founding Affle, Anuj has worked with large global brands like ESPN, Star Sports, Group M Mindshare, and JWT. Welcome, Anuj. Our third speaker for the session is Ms. Anusha Shetty, CEO, Autumn. A brand specialist at heart, Anusha co-founded Autumn Worldwide in 2005 to innovate and create new ways of understanding, connecting, synchronizing, and engaging to realize true value to the brand, customer, and ecosystem. Previously, she spearheaded initiatives at Honeywell Technology across the APAC region in the domains of aerospace, automation, and control and specialty materials. Welcome. The session is being moderated by Professor Anindya Ghose. Join me in welcoming all of them, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's such a pleasure to be back on campus, especially such a wonderful campus like ISB. It seems only like yesterday when I was a part of the campus, although it's almost 2 decades gone. But thank you very much for inviting me here. Thank you very much for having me and allowing me an opportunity to present my experiences and thoughts on mobile marketing and particularly location-based services. Over the course of the next 15 or 20 minutes, my aim will be to give you a brief overview of location-based services, focusing more on the practical aspects of location-based services, particularly in India. What are the factors that are aiding it? What are the factors that are hindering it? Some clever and new applications of location-based services, both in the banking space and outside. Also, what are these constraints that location-based services get affected by in India? What should marketers be watching out for? And what should technology providers be focusing on? And how do we see the road ahead? So quite a packed agenda in 15 minutes, but hopefully we can touch upon them and cover those. But before I jump into the depth of the presentation, I thought it may be a good idea to begin with on a slightly lighter note and look at how God upstairs and his angel Cupid tried using location-based services. Indeed, yeah. We have sort of progressed since then. I think we have slightly better ways of targeting people than what Cupid tried, but as we go along, we'll try and see what those ways are. Location-based services, we all understand it. Intuitively, we have a grasp of what location-based services do. But I just thought I'll take a couple of minutes to dwell on this definition. For in some ways, this definition gives me the roadmap of what both bankers, marketers, and the service providers should be looking at. If we read this definition quite carefully, there are quite a few things that come about. It says, LBS are a range of services that are based on information about the physical location. Now, information about physical location is quite key here, and it almost cuts the task for service providers in the sense that how can we get accurate information about consumers? How can we get this information at an affordable price? And how can we get this information without causing dissonance and disruption to customer behavior? So if there was a clever service provider, then he would look at this definition and say, this is what my task is all about. And if you go to the later part of that definition, it has a message for marketers as well. It says highly relevant, targeted communication at a time and place when the customer is most likely to act on it. So again, it defines the scope very clearly. It says don't broad brush offers. Don't sort of give all sorts of messages to customers because they're not interested. If you're very keen on location-based services growing and scaling up, it is very key to be targeted, segmented, offer that deal or offer that discount when the customer is most likely to take it up. So this, in many ways, sets up the scene on what location-based services is all about. Like Professor Ghose said, there are various ways in which you can start looking at location-based services, either through GPS or through Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or you name it. So these are various tools and devices that help us get there. But the crux is, one, it has to be targeted, segmented offer. It has to be at a time and place where customers are interested in acting on them, and it has to be a very, very clear sense of what the location is. Now let's look at what is aiding location-based services and what is helping people, what is helping this entire new marketing genre, as it were. The first thing is very obvious. Lots of people have said, given lots of data about this, the growth of mobile and in particular the growth of smartphones. I'm not going to bore you with data. You've seen a lot of it already. There was something in the Times of India today about how there's been 100% growth of smartphones in India. But just a couple of thoughts I'll leave you with. The first is that almost 2.5 hours are spent by smartphone users on a daily basis. So they do all sorts of things on the smartphone. 2.5 hours is a lot of time. If you sleep for 10 hours and you work for 10 hours, that leaves you only 4 hours left. So of that, you're spending 2.5 hours, or you're working, while you're working at work, you must be using a lot of smartphones. So it is a lot of time being spent on smartphones, a lot more than what the counterparts in the US do. So first, the growth in mobile and particularly the growth in smartphones sort of lends itself to location-based services. The second is that people are more and more open about sharing their location preferences. For example, especially in the age group 18 to 35, you see people giving all sorts of information. I'm going to be here at 3 o'clock. I'm going to be elsewhere at 5 o'clock. I'm going to be planning a Goa trip 2 weeks from now. So you name it and you have it. So it's a lot of data available, and something that Professor Ghose talked about as well. Not only can you get data about past behavior, you can then use that data to model how your future behavior will be. So that is becoming more and more open. People are less cagey about telling us where they are and what they will do. And that, again, is a big, big factor that helps LBS. And finally, again, going back to what Professor Ghose alluded, people will be people. The customer behavior across continents, across species doesn't change that much. If you have a fantastic offer, if you have a great deal going, then people are curious. To what extent they will go, how much they will extend themselves, we'll have to figure out. But the fact is that if there is a deal going, if there is an opportunity to get something better than market, then people will definitely be key. And that you can see from the way social networks are being used. People are looking for deals. People are discussing amongst their close network to figure out what is the best way to go ahead and get the best sort of opportunity for themselves. So 3 things in a sense. 1, the growth in mobile, especially growth in smartphones. Second, people being more sort of open about sharing information about their own locations. And third, people on the lookout for deals, and mobile sort of lends its way to resolve that issue. So if you look at the 3 key stakeholders in this ecosystem, there, of course, is the consumer who is interested in deals, who's happy about sharing his location preferences. Then there is the merchant or the company or banks like us who want to know how exactly we can capture this interest and this information. So how can we make offers that are targeted? Especially for banks like us, we have a substantial amount of data of how our consumers have behaved, both within the bank and outside. For example, a bank like Citi, which is one of the major players in e-commerce, has transaction details about how customers behave on the e-commerce portals. They also have banking details about how customers interact with various banks as well. So this, coupled with location, is an ideal fit for an organization like us. And similarly with the big retail stores, they have past data about how customers behave. They also can predict, based on that data, how customers will behave in the future, and therefore what sort of deals will work for them. And finally, for the technology providers, like I said early in the presentation, the ability to make this, to identify and sort of focus on the location and make sure that that particular accuracy level is maintained, but maintained at a cost that is affordable. As we go along, we'll talk about some of the costs currently that is offered to LBS marketers, and that becomes quite prohibitive. But if there was an option, if there were options for LBS marketers to use this technology at an affordable price, I think the game would change significantly. Let's look at some very preliminary sort of location-based applications that have been developed. I'll start with our own, and then we'll go along to some really clever ones that I thought were very, very impressive. This is something that Citi has as a part of its mobile app offering. This is, I mean, almost 25% of our customers who use the mobile app use this facility. It is a very rudimentary start to location-based services that allows customers to either scan through locations and find out where the nearest ATMs are, the branches are, what sort of dining offers they could get, or they could use the option of saying, I am at this particular place, show me in 2-kilometer radius what sort of offers I have. But it is, in many ways, a customer-initiated one. Customers have to reach out, go into that app, and if they're motivated about getting that offer, they will click on it and redeem themselves of that offer. So it's a start, but there is a lot of work going on in terms of improving it, in terms of scaling it up, in terms of making this clever, and therefore more useful for customers. Another one from Citi, and this is Citi Hong Kong. Similar stuff, except that in this particular case, this entire offer is integrated with the Citi wallet. So based on explicit customer consent to track the location of customers, these offers are thrown up to our customer base. And as you can see, at that particular location, 20% off on a dining offer. And customers could then pick from the wallet the Citi card that they want to use and redeem themselves one of the offer and also of the reward points. Moving on, I think these are two non-banking examples, and I'm quite fascinated by the first one. This is a shoe store in Guatemala, and the store is called Meatpack. I don't know why a shoe store is called Meatpack, but it is called Meatpack. And what they did is that they have a very innovative discount offer. The way it worked is that they had this app which they distributed to their customers and friends. And they also geofenced their competitor locations. Geofence, as we learned earlier, is the virtual boundary around a geographical location. And once you cross that boundary, there is the ability to trigger an alert to the customer. So what they did was to create this app, discount app, and then geofence their competitor location. So as and when their consumer went into the competitor geofencing, this app would throw in a discount offer. It will start a recorder, and it would say that the prices would start dropping to 99%, 98%, and 1% down. And depending on the time it took the customer, the price would drop. So if the customer took 10 seconds to reach the store, Meatpack store, then he would get 90% off on the shoe store. So the moment the customer landed at the Meatpack shoe store and the counter said 35%, he would get 35% discount on the shoes. So this app was called Hijack. Apparently, fantastic response it had from its own consumers. Almost 600 customers apparently were taken away from their competitors. A similar app used by a Russian newspaper, essentially to promote social awareness. What they did here was that because of bad parking, there was a lot of intrusion, there was a lot of disturbance to local residents. So they created this app where residents could actually picture a badly parked car, and that data could be streamed on banner ads in the local network. So the ads would become so intrusive and it was so apparent that X car with this number plate was badly parked, that this message would spread, and it will sort of name and shame the people who did that. So apparently they created a tremendous amount of social awareness for poor parking in this case. So there are quite a few examples. There is Toyota who have done a virtual car, a backseat driving. There is McDonald's who have done another piece on helping customers get fantastic discount rates. So the fact is that there is a lot of activity going on in this space. Most of it is targeted towards straight in-the-face discounts. But as this market evolves, as customers and service providers become more intelligent, you will have more subtle ways of influencing customers to take the sort of bargains that you're looking for. In which case, is everything hunky-dory? Are things fantastic and we can now quickly go into location-based services? The answer, unfortunately, in India is that not everything is great. There are quite a few constraints that we have. So let's look at them. There are 4 boxes that are sort of challenges for us to face. The first is on the technology side. If you look at our geographical information system, that is still quite rudimentary, right? You're not going to get accurate data about where customers are located in India today. You would get sort of ballpark. There are various technologies coming up which will say that, look, you're there or thereabouts, about 50 meter radius here and there, but it isn't accurate. And the second thing, like I sort of alluded to earlier, is that it is quite prohibitive. And we did try and pilot one such aspect. We did try and pilot a geo-fencing activity, and I can tell you that the cost ran into lakhs of rupees. So if you're doing this as a marketing ROI, then it wouldn't stack up. The only reason people would be interested in it is that, one, is the pilot, so it's a curiosity element to it. Second, it's a first-in-market novelty piece. So as of now, the way the dynamics work, especially on the cost, it makes it slightly unviable for marketers to delve in. But that is today's story. We'll look at it a couple of years down the line and we'll talk differently about it. The second piece is the infrastructure. If you look at the sort of infrastructure that we have, then you'll find that even now bandwidth constraints exist in India. Not all malls are Wi-Fi enabled. But this again is a snapshot of the present. And as we go along, hopefully these things will improve, and that will help us push or sort of grow location-based services. The other thing we talk about is the smartphone penetration. Smartphones are growing rapidly, some 100% growth rate if you look at one particular edition, some 80% growth rate if you look at something else. So the fact is that they are growing rapidly. But having said that, the absolute number of smartphones in India today is still quite low. It's about 6 to 7% if you look at the whole country. If you look at the metros, it's likely to be in about 20-25% range. And if you look at the affluent segment, it's likely to be in the 40 to 50% range. So if affluent segment were a country, then we are doing really well. But overall, as a country, this infrastructure and the penetration of mobile phones, penetration of smartphones needs to really go up. The next one is the market ecosystem. I think as marketers, we have to evolve as well. Currently, the thought is very much about quantity being the holy grail. The more emails you send, the more messages you bombard customers with, chances are that you would get a better result. There are some firms who are focusing and making sure, honing in on customer behavior and therefore targeting, but that practice, that mindset has to come in. We are still a little bit away from targeting and making sure that customers are given only what they want, at the time they want it, at the place they would like it. So there's still some way to go before we get to that level. And finally, the consumer mindset itself. I did mention that people in the age group 18 to 34 are quite open to sharing information. But this, again, is a particular segment of the population. Not everyone is happy to say where they are. If you look at certain usage of mobile phones in India today, it is mainly for text and talking, data and database services. While they're growing from a very small base. So there is some room to go before these start becoming more prevalent. So all in all, the current snapshot is not great in terms of making sure that LBS can become a fantastic thing tomorrow. But the long-term success of LBS is quite guaranteed. Going by the examples that Professor shared earlier, in China, Korea, the US, these things are happening, and it's only a matter of time. And in some ways, we will catch up. In India, we'll catch up a lot faster than we've caught up on some of the earlier initiatives. So all those 4 factors, technology, ecosystem, infrastructure, consumer mindsets, will change. How quickly they will change is anybody's guess, but I'm more an optimist. I would think in the next couple of years, we should see some significant uptakes in LBS. So I'm very hopeful that this will happen. So in the future, what can we see? So if you look at it from those three stakeholders' point of view, from a consumer perspective, we will start to see segmented offers. We will start to see offers that are targeted at the time that I want it. But before we get to that stage, we will also see a lot of riffraff and rubbish that comes our way. So we have to be a bit patient and say, look, the market is evolving, the marketers are evolving, so this sort of pain will be there. So I think we will go through that transition where we will have to go through some really bad phases before we get to the good one. But like I said, that is a path, a roadmap that we will go through. From a merchant perspective, this is an area that allows a merchant or an organization to target the consumers that they are interested in. It allows them, it gives them data about their consumers. So there will be significant amount of investment in this space. Like I said, we as Citi are already investing in this area, and I'm sure, and I know that for a fact that there are other banks who are working on this as well. So this definitely is an area that will grow, and people are already investing money in it. But what it also means is that if so many people are investing, if so many people are bullish about this, there is bound to be significant amount of competition. So both competition as well as investment dollars will come about in this space. And finally, for a service provider, I think the task is really cut out. The ability to make sure that this technology is accurate, the ability to make this technology affordable, the ability to find other ways of locating a customer. These are things that technology providers should be working on. I know some of them are already working on. We've had some feelers from quite a few technology companies to invest in them. But these are three areas that as technology providers, they will really focus on. So if all these three stakeholders reach their end state, deliver what they are, deliver the path that they're taking, LBS, like I said, is just bound to grow. It's only a matter of time that happens in India. So that's all I had. Thank you very much for a very patient hearing. I'll be happy to take questions at the end of this session. Thank you very much indeed.
Hello everybody, good morning. I think before I start off, I think a brief introduction to myself so that you get a perspective on what I'm going to talk about. So I'm an entrepreneur who got into digital advertising, specifically mobile advertising 7 years ago. That's pretty much as old as the mobile ad industry is. And if you look back, 7 years seems small, but from a mobile ad perspective, that's pretty much the age of the industry. That was the era where BlackBerry was still called a smartphone, where if you would have had a forum like this, maybe 80% of you would be having the Nokia ringtone running out. And I'm sure all of that has changed significantly. And along with that, obviously, what has happened on the mobile advertising side has also changed dramatically during this period. I still remember, like when we started out our company 7 years ago, our product was around a mobile application. And I remember going to venture capitalists and like, mobile app? Who downloads an app? And that's the kind of reaction you would get. And now in the world where you live in, obviously these things have become so intrinsic to the way we live that we really can't imagine how life would be without it. So I think that's really a brief perspective. So I've seen a lot of things change in mobile advertising. Obviously location is something which is very exciting, still nascent, but in terms of capability, I think a lot more can happen out there. So in my quick 15-minute session, what I plan to cover is one, look at key trends which are happening in the mobile advertising ecosystem. And I think those trends really zoom in terms of how location becomes more important to make this industry grow larger. And then look at location in terms of what are the enablers and how smart marketers, even within the kind of constraints which exist in the infrastructure today, can leverage location and leverage it such that it can lead not just to offers or sales happening, but also to brand building. So I think that's a few examples, and I've kept the examples relevant to India or markets which are similar to India in terms of smartphone, feature phone kind of a breakup. so that it's more relatable to the audience out here. I think just going in onto the key trends, I think the first key trend, I think, which I'm seeing and which a lot of us who've spent significant time in this industry is that what this industry has always been plagued by is that mobile advertising, or pretty much mobile internet, has earlier been looked at as a poor cousin of PC internet. I think today, like even in the morning, we heard Facebook, that Facebook is today going and saying that mobile first and mobile best. And all of these statements, companies, everybody making those statements, customizing things for the mobile device, was not happening around 18 to 24 months ago. And the speed at which every company is seeing that how they are becoming, how they need to embrace that change, because the consumers have already embraced that change. And if the organizations are not embracing the mobile change, then clearly those organizations really don't have too long a life, because the consumers' primary and possibly the only device from which they would access internet will be the mobile device. So I think that's clearly, and so we are seeing a lot of examples, Facebook for one, looking at mobile, clearly seeing the benefits of that with the kind of revenues they're seeing on that. That customization is here to stay, and that's, I think, a key trend that, and I think some very good examples. I'll tell you something which is happened to me fairly recently. I was there at Hindustan Unilever fairly recently. They were having this big mobile day conference, in where what they did was that they called a few companies who they found were doing exciting work in mobile advertising, and they had their entire management come up and talk to them in terms of what they were doing. Now we had one of the senior most people from the Unilever team walking in, and somebody in his team wanted to impress him, somebody in the digital marketing side, and told him that, you know what, our company is really embracing mobile advertising, and we just launched a mobile site for one of our brands. And as would happen for any demo, when the executive director starts logging into the site doesn't load, oh, it's some Android feature, it doesn't work on your phone, and all of those errors which usually happen in demos happen. And that's what I saw a few weeks ago. And what I heard from Unilever was actually quite an eye-opener in terms of the state of mind which a lot of marketers are embracing right now, was that next time you make a website, make it mobile first and then customize it for PC, you won't go wrong. If you do it the other way, there is much greater chance of you going wrong. So customization is here to stay. You have companies who are embracing it. You have marketers who are embracing it. If you're not embracing it, really the future may not look that bright. The second is around the whole smartphone business, around how advertising is getting smarter. And smarter, obviously, one part is that the smartphone itself has capabilities which can make the advertising experience much more immersive. Like just comparing PC advertising and mobile advertising is kind of different. Like, when did you last touch a PC banner? I'm sure none of us would go in and take our finger to a PC screen and touch. So the kind of engagement and the interactivity which the phone offers is very different. And thus, smarter advertising, leveraging rich media, leveraging video, is clearly ways marketers are embracing this smart culture and ensuring that whatever they are communicating is much smarter, because the consumer is engaging with them on a much smarter device, and which creates a lot more opportunities for location-based advertising itself, which I'll walk in through a little later. The third thing, which is a very, very important trend again, is around native advertising. Again, something which I think the pioneer of native advertising is pretty much Google, because for a lot of consumers who may not be from an advertising or marketing domain, may not even know that sponsored links and the actual search results are different. And a lot of us in this room would obviously know that, because that's the kind of things we learn in business schools, we learn otherwise. But a lot of consumers across the country would not know that, and that truly is native advertising. An ad does not need to stand out of the content. An ad has to merge into the content to become more effective. And I think the whole native advertising thing, we are seeing it immerse itself much greater in the mobile advertising domain. And I think from a location perspective, it is around how, so I think earlier it was that, okay, I would do something on location. Now, how is it that I can make location immersive to everything I'm doing on mobile advertising? Because the device is allowing you the capability to leverage that context which did not exist earlier. So the native part is a really significant trend, which is impacting all aspects of mobile advertising as we know it. Obviously, location being a part of it does get impacted by it. The fourth key trend, I think Professor Ghose also talked about the context of time and location, which are very important contexts, which is making advertising much more relevant. I think beyond that, we're seeing significantly greater context coming in. So time and location are obviously two. You have context like the kind of information you're consuming, context like the handset which you're consuming it on, and those kind of intelligence. So the kind of data which the marketer is today sitting on is rich data, knowing you as a consumer that I'm living in a particular place, traveling to certain locations very often, using a certain device, which in a lot of markets would be a really good surrogate of the kind of purchasing power the consumer has, and consuming a certain kind of content, which actually is a good surrogate of the kind of mindset I would have as a consumer. So with all of these parameters, which are true parameters around how I am consuming my mobile internet, using those contexts to make your advertising messages more relevant is really what is going to make it more impactful. So advertising, as it's moving on, I think it's much more about customization rather than standardization. And the customization can only happen if you are leveraging the multiple contexts which exist. So the data may exist. If you're not using it, you're not spending your ad dollar really in the most optimum way, because technology today allows you to spend it that way. A simple banner which each one of us can look at could actually be different even if the advertiser is the same, and that's where it can get made on the fly based on what our past consumption or our purchasing powers are. And I think those are significant trends which are happening in the mobile advertising ecosystem right now. So I think those four are key things which I'm seeing right now, which are dramatically changing in the way consumers are adapting mobile and how advertisers are leveraging it for advertising. Now coming into location and putting location into perspective, I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think a few years ago it was around location being a part of your, so if I have $100 to spend, I would spend some part of it on digital. Within digital, I'll try and do various things. Location will be one part of the spends which I'm undertaking. What's happening now and what should happen in a much greater way going forward is location has to become another context which is part of all your advertising. So in the old world where advertising was primarily consumed in the home when you're watching TV or possibly in your office when you were reading the newspaper, to today when the entire media is consumed on a mobile phone or tablet, where you're consuming it on the go, where there are technologies which allow you to leverage that location, ensuring that the location intelligence is part of every ad campaign you're doing is very, very important. And that location intelligence could be from the point of view that I may, for certain users who may be using smartphones, who may have kept their GPS on, I may have knowledge today as a marketer that these guys are sitting inside ISB campus and possibly maybe having a certain kind of a mindset, to possibly slightly more rudimentary ways in which I may know people that are living in Hyderabad or certain localities in Hyderabad who may not even have smartphones, but still that location information is something which I could use. So it's around blending location in the way you're thinking and blending it across all kinds of digital advertising, specifically mobile advertising, because that clearly is an area where the location context is available in a much more easier way than it is on PC or any other traditional formats of advertising. What are the enablers which are making this much more exciting than what it has been over the last few years? I think the use cases always existed. I think I remember going to conferences like 7, 8 years ago, people giving this dream scenario that walking outside a Starbucks, a coupon walks into your phone and 10% off, you go in. Those things were really dream scenarios 7, 8 years ago. We really didn't have technology to enable that. But the use cases existed. Today, the technology and the infrastructure is backing us to ensure that those use cases are reality, and we are seeing the impact of that already happening. So the technology has changed. And technology also has allowed us that it's not just GPS, obviously GPS-based, smartphone-based location advertising is the most accurate form of location advertising you can get. But there are several other examples in terms of how you can really leverage this smartly, and I'll give you an example. This is something which has happened in India, and this happened around the Kumbh Mela. Now the Kumbh Mela obviously is the largest aggregation of humanity which happens at one particular place. Bulk of people who you would imagine who are coming to the Kumbh Mela are people who are carrying feature phones. Now, how do you ensure that you can do location-based advertising on those feature phone users while they have all aggregated at the Kumbh Mela? And we had one Indian advertiser, Colgate-Palmolive, do it fairly successfully. Now, how they did it was around ensuring that people who are coming in, like in the traditional telecom world, there is a concept of circles, which I guess most of you would be aware of, which are like states that if you cross one state to the other, the telecom operator knows that you have crossed, and I'm sure all of us have experienced it because we get those messages that welcome to AP, you have just landed there, and these are the numbers. Now, what was done by Colgate-Palmolive was they created a virtual circle, which is for the 3 towers which were around the area of the Kumbh Mela. And people who were entering that circle, which was linking into those 3 towers, So they did not need to have a smartphone, but on feature phones, Colgate-Palmolive could know that, okay, these are guys now around Allahabad, around the time of the Kumbh Mela, and how they can leverage that information, again, was not through a banner ad or a rich media ad, because that's really not the kind of audience they were talking to, but was through voice-based communication. So what they had was that people who were there, they would get a call. The call would be possibly from the original Indian RJ, which is Amin Sayani, which a lot of people who've grown up, was slightly older demographic would know. I'm sure a lot of others may not know him. So he would call you and tell you that how the Colgate products are so much, like there were 10 rupee pack which you could buy. So that's really smart use of location. No GPS, no smartphone, no internet, still using location-based advertising to reach your message across. So I think once we start thinking, we can go on to the utopian world and say, I need all of these things to be there in place for me to start thinking location, for me to have a location strategy, or look at that there is a lot of things around it. You can work way around it. And I think as Indians, I think the whole Indian concept of jugaad is around figuring your ways around it. You know there is a challenge on the infrastructure, on the technology. You figure a way around it and ensure that the use case, which is, if you believe in the use case, there is a way for you to making it happen. And I think the Colgate example on the Kumbh Mela is one such example. There could be other examples, like there is something which we as a company work with in Indonesia. There is again, Indonesia as a market is fairly similar to India in terms of mobile data, in terms of smartphone penetration. So obviously the challenge in terms of gathering location is there. What we do is work with the carrier. So the telecom carrier obviously knows where I'm traveling because he knows where I'm connecting it to. And by mining that data, we can figure out that, okay, this is one guy who's going on, say, every Saturday to a particular mall to shop. Now, how is it that we leverage that data is that we go on to somebody else who's running another mall, that now this is the guy whose regular shopping cycle is that he goes once a week to this mall. Now you can leverage this data. Obviously, you can't send him a fancy rich media or a video, etc., because his phone may not support it. But you send him like almost like a flash message, which is location based, which a lot of us have forgotten flash SMS. So it will pretty much look like the kind of push notifications which you would see on your smartphones, but delivered over the SMS channel and not delivered over mobile data, which makes it impactful for markets like Indonesia and India. So again, a smart way, figuring ways around it, leveraging data, ensuring that you can do location-based advertising within the bottlenecks, and ensure that the use case which you have in mind is you're doing good things around it. So the enablers obviously are there. The use cases existed. Technology is easier with all of these things happening, plus the smart era, which is making you much more aware of that. The handset OS, which was a significant challenge that even in the early days of smartphones, the big challenge was that most people would leave their location services off because they were such a big drainer on the battery. I think battery problem, I think to me is possibly the biggest problem on smartphone, which is still not solved. And it will need a smart entrepreneur to solve that right now. But with the kind of technologies which have happened right now, I think we are far better than what we were a few years ago. And I think that makes the even the smartphone GPS-based location advertising that much more scalable, because a lot more people, even in this audience, would have location services on because they're using location services day in and day out, and their battery is not really getting impacted. The ad serving platform, so today any ad network who you're talking to who's really going out and serving, any ad network who's building technology expertise already has integrated like location as a context. So there is no really reason to shy away from it that technology is not allowing me. Actually, what is curtailing the marketers is more the will, that it's like all of us love to be caught in the inertia that you have a reason for not doing something. So the reason for not doing location is possibly highlighting a few of those things. So none of those things are reasons. I think the use cases are strong and there are enough ways to work around it. So I think that's pretty much, I think, what I could capture in the short session which I wanted to talk about. I think I'll end with another example, not something very obvious which you associate with location advertising. Now today, if you go on to Google, just search for location advertising, look at how different advertisers have looked for it. Most of the case studies, videos you will find are for things which is like similar to a Starbucks example, and magical happens when you walked out of that. I think what we wanted to do was, as a company, we built something which is that how can we create that magic, how can we deliver that magic to our advertiser partners who may not even have, like, whose objective in a particular campaign may not even be so much as direct sales, but more around creating awareness of what they're doing. So this is a fairly interesting example. This is from India, done by Adidas a few months ago for a new product which they had launched. And I think the video will say pretty much what I want to say here around how differently location advertising has been used. Okay. that's pretty much it, what I had. Anything else? I can obviously address queries on my Twitter handle or on email. Thanks a lot. We'll all take questions, I'm sure, after the session.
All right, our next speaker is going to be Anusha.
Hi, good afternoon, friends. Good afternoon, esteemed panel. Thank you, ISB, for inviting me here. It's a pleasure to be at the campus. Personally, Hyderabad's a very special city for me. I grew up here the early part of my years studying in a school called St. Anne's. And so coming back to the city is always full of childhood memories for me. Of course, there was no ISB at that point of time. We ready? So I'm here to specifically, while my friends here on the panel have spoken intensively on a subject of location-based marketing, the mobile itself, I'm here to specifically talk on a subject where social meets mobile. Let me quickly introduce myself. I'm a social media specialist, which means really, I come from the world of building brands and today focus in a space where I help brands to build themselves in the social space. With the world going so mobile, the influence of this on the social space is intense. And so I'm here to specifically speak on the subject called Where Social Meets Mobile. As I was walking up this dais, I had a beep on my mobile and my colleagues from work shared a few numbers with me, and let me share this with you actually. In the last couple of days that we've all known this digital summit is coming up, there have been a lot of social conversations happening around the space, right? So there have been around, any guesses on the kind of conversations that could be happening, the number of conversations? Anybody? Yeah, okay. So there's around 1,500 conversations, okay, in the last couple of days. People telling, sharing that, that they're coming on to a digital summit or something's happening here, or speaking about the speakers specifically. But this morning, I asked my colleagues at work to actually check the number of conversations that's happening from this morning, and let's say 9:30 onwards when this program really started off. And I can tell you that at this point of time in the last couple of hours, and we've been here only for a couple of hours, right? We've had around 300 conversations happening in the social space. And my assumption, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that most of these conversations have been activated from this room here, from your mobiles. So friends, this is the world that we are living in. This is the world of social media, and this is the world of mobile devices. And they're blending together to create this intricate relationship between themselves. I'm here to speak on two things really, specifically on this subject. I want to actually talk about this intricate relationship between these two subjects of social media and mobile. I also want to share some assessments and some forecasts that I think is going to happen in the space of social media really. Yeah, so I change? All right. Yeah, so social media and the intricate relationship. Mobile phones put the social in the social space. The constant vibrating and beeping and non-stop pushes of notifications, right? Where it be tags, messages, comments that we see that's happening on our mobile phones are actually prompting a connection between users and their virtual lives. So therefore, it's not shocking to me as numbers when I actually see the numbers. Numbers of people accessing social media platforms from their mobile phones. There are 66% of Facebook users, or let's say 50% of Twitter users, and I'm talking about India. 36% of, let's say, LinkedIn users. 25% of YouTube users access their social platforms from their mobile phones. 66 million people, friends, live in an urban social media, 66%, sorry, social media users live in an urban city. And 93% of these people access their social platforms from a mobile device. Now, isn't this really interesting? I understand and they acknowledge and admit that 29% of them actually admit that social media is actually one of their top activities that they conduct from their mobile phones. It is a fact that, you know, the numbers of, or, you know, the number of likes, tweets, messages, or posts that can happen out of a mobile is twice as likely to happen than a traditional desktop, you know, today. So this is really where it is. So mobile phones actually put the social in social media, and this is really an indication of that. Let's look at this slide. Not Gen X or Gen Y, this is the tethered world, right? So the youth, you know, the college students are not only tethered to their phones, they're also tethered to the friends on their phones, really. A recent study, you know, across 52 nationalities in 8 universities, across some 800 and odd students in 3 continents actually showed a very interesting pattern. And the first thing is that youth across the world, irrespective of location, nationality, behave the same, specifically to do with social media and mobiles, really. Yeah, so they treat, let's say, CNBC as their new, as, you know, CNBC is their new, sorry, Twitter is their new CNBC, for example, and their phones are their remote controls. It's you know, it's a habit, right? So they go on and read the news on Twitter, and today they seem to get their first-hand information out of a Twitter channel than anywhere else. Returning a wall post or a message or a comment or any other kind of feed instantly from a mobile is critical for these people. Right? Because, and I'm told that if they don't do it, the levels of anxiety and stress only increases. They cannot live for a moment without being in control of their own social world. Now that's an interesting aspect, right? They acknowledge that they're addicted to social media from their mobiles, and they're not unhappy about it, and they believe that it is impossible for them to live even a single day without their mobile phones and their connections with social media. They do use their phones to network, and that world seems to be more real than the real world. I recently heard this little incident, and I found this extremely amusing, that in a recent earthquake tremor that was witnessed in India, one of these young boys who was part of this tremor, you know, immediately after the tremor, you know, started to quickly tweet and post about the tremor. The need to actually be the first person to tweet or share this information with their friends and network is so much more important in their minds than actually saving themselves or saving their friends in the neighborhood or even alerting people about this. So this is really where the youth is going today in terms of things, right? So, yeah. Let's look at self-expression as an attitude, right? So, and how it's going real time, right? The social networks were built on the premise of sharing, right? So whether it was to do with sharing your own interests, sharing photographs, sharing life moments, social platforms have actually become the ultimate source for people to express themselves in a unique format. Let's just look at our own lives, you know, if you look at our lives. Gone are the days, right? Since, you know, you go on a vacation, you come back. In the past, when I mean the past, even a couple of months ago, we would come back and, you know, transfer pictures, post these pictures and share our opinions and views. But today, life is more real time, right? So gone are those days when we used to really come back from a vacation to do this. Today, it's all about let's do it now, right here, right now. I have an opinion, I want to share it. I love this food, I have to share it. You know, I love this place, I want to share it. I think this guy is good looking, I need to tell people. So it's about sharing this feeling instantly, and not only sharing instantly, it's all about receiving that gratification in return instantly, right? So you want people, you want your contacts to actually come back and tell you, yes, you want them to acknowledge what you're saying, you want them to appreciate your point of view, you want them to tell you you're looking good in those pictures. So this is really where the world is heading in terms of, right, in terms of real time. You know, I was just looking at it from a brand perspective, and I said, while all these real-time expressions are getting so beautiful, on the flip side, for brands, and for brands who want to manage their ecosystem in the social space, this is something that they really need to take care of, because while customers share their views and opinions openly and honestly, brands need to ensure that they are there to resolve or put a process in place to resolve this in real time. So you're not going to be doing things a couple of hours later, because that's the way the system works. And if everything is real time, you need to be there and you need to have your process in place real time. Going local. Very interesting things. Actually, my friends here have actually spoken quite a bit on the subject, but let me quickly speak about it from a brand perspective, and, and which is really where I'm talking about. 74% of customers today use location-based services to get directions or get recommendations. So friends, if you are, specifically a brick-and-mortar location, make sure that you're thinking local and you're there. Right? So brands are using this platform in many different ways, and I really don't want to repeat much because my friends here have shared quite a bit, but it is not normal anymore to expect offers and discounts. Brands are rewarding their patrons with rewards, discounts. Recently, Jimmy Choo ran an interesting contest on location-based services, and what people did was thousands of people across London actually checked in to just win a pair of those Jimmy Choo shoes. More brands are doing things even more differently, right? So they're looking at consumer analytics in very different ways, right? So check-ins allowed you to actually access this data, read this data, see how this data can be used from different perspectives, add value to yourself as a brand, add value to a customer, and transform their lives in many different ways. So, for example, this could be to do with understanding peak sales time that's happening, for example, at a store. And just looking at that peak sales time, and there could be many different decisions that brands can take in terms of how they can deal with this brand, right? Or it could be to do with consumer demographics, right? Who are they? What are they doing? What age are they? What interest profiles are they? Can we do something differently to make a difference with this connect, really? So that's really where the world is going in terms of going local. Need for distractions, very exciting, and this is a subject that amuses me even more. People actually use mobiles to kind of, they take advantage to kind of, to ensure that they do things. If they have a little time, a little downtime, then mobile is that perfect distraction for them at this point of time. And when we mean mobile, I'm talking about mobiles blended into the social media platform, right? So you're on a train station in Bombay waiting for a train, and you will not be surprised if you see many number of people out there actually scanning their mobile phones. You're in a meeting, or you're in between two meetings, and you will see that people are actually checking their social platforms. Just last week, I have a son who's 11 years old, and I was at a parent-teacher meeting. So we were waiting for my turn, and there was this couple sitting with the teacher in front of me, and I was standing for, and I noticed that the teacher, at a point of this conversation, decided to refer to her journal because she wanted to share some data with the parent. So as she looked at her journal, I noticed this gentleman, right, the father of this child, quickly looking under the table and, scanning a couple of pages on his social feeds. And this is really, nobody, even if you give people a couple of seconds, everybody is happy to do a quick check on what's happening. And it's not just about them. I do this all the time at the airport. Every time I'm stuck at the airport, I thank God for these social feeds because my life would be extremely boring if I didn't do that. The other cute example is at the gym that I kind of witness every day. I'm one of those fitness freaks. I hit Gold's Gym every morning. And I run one of these classes called the RPM, which is the Intense Cardio Cycling Program, right? So it's an on-the-spot program. So what happens at this place is that you get 2 bottle holders on the cycle, which is a clear indication that you need that quantum of water to even survive that routine. But what I notice very often is that while one of those holders has a bottle, the other holder is actually a mobile holder. And the page, and the social feed page is always open, right? So normally these classes run in bursts of 7 minutes. So you get a 30-second break where the trainer informs the class about what's coming up next and really for you to hydrate yourself, right? But I notice people rushing for that phone out there, quickly checking their feeds, posting something, doing something, and then they're back to their cycling programs, right? So distraction is really a key element of this relationship that's really happening. And let me ask you all actually this question. How many of you actually carry your mobile phones into your shower? Let's be sportive, guys. Come on, lift your hands on this. Yeah, see, that's nice. That's a nice, honest thing. Okay, how many of you actually take your phone into your bed? Yeah, see, oh my God, we should take a picture of this actually. Yeah, so there is this very cute phrase that we all use at work, right? So one of the things that we do as a part of our strategy, and we know that a lot of people actually take their phones to bed, and that's the perfect time to actually connect with them. So, you know, the phrase goes that, you know, end of the day, you're tired, you switch off or you turn off the lights and then switch on the phone, and that's really where distraction as an attribute is really heading. Increased connectedness, right? You know, thanks to social media and the very real-time accessibility that mobiles are giving social media, the level of connect that's happening between users and their contacts is growing exponentially. Friends who were never best friends are today best friends suddenly, right? So you've lost touch with a lot of people and then you're getting closer. The bonding is getting extremely clear. So you will notice that suddenly distances don't seem to matter, which seemed to have mattered a couple of years ago. You will notice that time differences across continents don't matter at all. While it is obvious that bonding and relationships are going to the next milestone, so are the complexities increasing, right? Because it's obviously giving rise to peer pressure, jealousy, anger, frustration. And so this is really where, even in the case of a social ad, let me look at this from a different angle. And you will see that Anna Hazare movement, or let's take the Egyptian revolution that happened really, is that you will see crowdsourcing, right? Actually resulted in a bigger and deeper connect between people and the cause that they were associated with. So this is really where the world is heading. So friends, this is really what I wanted to share in terms of a relationship that's happening between social media and mobile. But let me quickly share 3 things that I think I want to share about where I think this world is heading. I have 3 assessments to make, and let me share this. The first, you know, there are 138 million internet users today in India. 87% of them access the internet from their mobile phones, and that's approximately around 120 million users. Today, India has around 105 million users on social media. The prediction is that in 5 years from now, the internet user base is going to grow to 358 million users, right? My belief that there is going to be no gap. The population between all these 3 segments is going to be equal. And it's growing in that rapid phase, and there's going to be really no difference between the 3. The second assessment that I want to share with you all is this to do with the fact that social and mobile strategies will be intricately connected to deliver brand goals and not just digital goals. In my experience in the last many years that I've been working with various brands, I can see even 2 years ago, right, that marketeers were looking at this with skepticism. They had a critical eye. You know, they said, okay, I think this is a hype. I don't believe this. Let's explore it. Let's test it. People were being pushed to actually explore this medium. Today, life is different, right? I see a lot more participation. I see clients actually participating in in the social space to see how this can deliver value for them. However, it's still a part of a digital goal, right? So there is this overall marketing function, and then there is a digital function, and there are digital goals, which is aligned to the overall marketing goals. But social media is still seen as something that's aligned to a digital goal. It's a subset of the digital goal. The budgets are a subset of digital goals. My belief is that the real difference and challenge lies in the marketeers, the real marketeers, the leads, the guys who know it all, the ones with the maturity and the best practices and the learnings. They need to jump in. The day they jump in, true realization will be achieved in the social space, and the time has come. I think it's going to happen now, and I already see that happening with a lot of marketeers. So today is the day when we're going to see this difference. The third and the last thing that I want to talk about is really the growth of the various communities, the fact that there's so much happening and there's so much knowledge that's stemming from social communities, whether it's to do with news, whether it's to do with Bollywood, or whether it's to do with social advocacy, right? I believe that there will be dominant platforms here. I won't be surprised if people get up in the morning and not read the Times of India, that they actually open a social community site and actually check their news from a user-generated content and message. It is just a matter of time, and we're going to see this happening, and I can see a lot of news channels having to reinvent themselves at this point of time, right? So friends, while I end this, and I actually want to throw a parallel, you know, a couple of years ago when you met somebody would say, hey, where are you from? Are you from Bangalore? Are you from Chennai? Are you from Hyderabad, Delhi? Where do you live? Which building? Which area? And this is how people spoke to each other. And then came an era where people said, what's your email ID, right? And then 5 years ago, it was all about mobile numbers. what is your mobile number, right? And there's a famous song around it. So what's your mobile number? And today, it's the first thing that you hear, and I'm sure you've heard it amongst yourselves. It's all about what's your handle, by the way, and what's your Facebook identity? Do you have a LinkedIn ID? I heard that a couple of times today, this morning, as I was here. And Bollywood is a beautiful reflection of this evolving era that's really happening, right? So if you go back and look at songs in Bollywood, most songs in the historical era, and I'm talking about a couple of years ago, really happened about chittis and postmen and, and the missing, the emotions associated with posts and letters, which changed to a couple of years ago to mobiles, with Govinda singing this famous song about what's your mobile number. I think the true day for social media is going to arrive when we see the next song that happens with handles and tags and hashtags, and I don't think it's too far away. Thank you, friends. Ladies and gentlemen, it was a pleasure talking with you all today.
All right, so I had a bunch of questions, but we are way over time. So I'm just going to ask one question and then leave it up to the rest of you guys if you want to ask them anything. I know Sridhar has to leave, so I'll start with Sridhar. So, if I were, so this is slightly high level and I'll come down to nitty-gritty. So I'm fascinated by the kind of data set that Citibank has access to, right? So you alluded to this before. For example, you have data on retail transactions of consumers offline. You've got now additional data on how consumers who are using your mobile app are able to act upon geolocated targeted ads. So I'm trying to get a sense for where we are in India in terms of using data to drive decision making. So for example, our conversations within Citibank headed towards this direction where people are saying, let's merge this offline retail transaction data with the same consumers' mobile usage data for those apps and geo-targeted ads, and get those actionable insight that leads to like highly precise targeted ads and offers. So can you just tell us more about where in India we are with these?
It's a really good question. I think there are two aspects to this question. The first aspect is in terms of thought, this intelligence and this knowledge that we have to use the customer data that we already have across the various facets that the customer uses it in, whether it's be offline or online or surfing data or mobile transaction data. The need to use it, the hunger to use it, all that is there. But that is the first aspect. The good aspect is that we all know this, we all know that this is par for us and this is what we need to use to be competitive. The second aspect is the system capabilities and the legacy system that we have, which were created at one particular time to sort of solve for one particular need. So these now operate as silos. So the mobile transaction data is a silo, the retail transaction data is a silo, the web interactions that the customer does is another silo. The ability to link all that and make sense out of it is the challenge. And while we have progressed in that area in terms of creating a single CRM and using that data more intelligently, I think there is a long way to go. This definitely is the area that we'll focus on. But are we the best in class as far as this goes? Not quite. I think we need, and in some ways it's quite ironic. Banks that started really well a long time ago are facing this problem because their legacy systems are even more robust. And banks that started, say, or banks, even organizations that started, say, a couple of years ago are that much more nimble and they can integrate this a lot quickly.
I'll take a break and leave it up to the rest of you. I see your hand over there.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Pathik. I have one question that throughout the discussion we have had on mobile and social integrating, we have talked about customers. What about effectively increasing the productivity of the sales force? Let's say in an insurance like financial services or insurance where you have large people on field. Why not use location-based apps for making them more productive? What if my sales guy goes to a street and sees 10 different people? He just does his tab or mobile like this and he sees data about his clients, his competitor clients. Or let's say we are talking of government agencies. So let's say PDS, public distribution system. So for a given locality, he can see if out of 1 million households, whether 40 fall in this category or 40,000 fall in this category. So instead of focusing on ads and something, why can't we focus on developing apps which gives sales much more productivity, which is very relevant to my sales client rather than my outside customer? Yeah.
Either Sridhar or Anuj, I guess you guys can take it.
I think there are a couple of ways in which organizations will approach this. The first one would be to say which is the biggest bang for their buck, right? So if they were to invest their resources, where is it that they'll get maximum sort of uptake? And currently the answer is that if you go to the consumer, you'll get a lot more. But as banks and as organizations figure this route out, they will start to percolate and say, look, we've made a big dent or big upside on the consumer side. Now, can we not do this internally? Can we not automate our sales force? Can we not use this as a lead source for our sales force? And I think that will go on. So if you look at various channels, that's the way it's worked. If you look at internet, for example, the way when it was done in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was more to start off with the consumer, then they started the intranet, then they started the local, within their organization, they started to use it. I think so banks will go the way they get the maximum return, and the diminishing returns will take its own path.
Fine, thanks.
Do you want to add something?
So I think it's both of the things happening. It's not that that side is not being developed. I think you have to look at it from the perspective of the panel, that this panel is more representing, the topic is more around advertising, and that's why we focused on that. But I'm sure if you look around, there are enough companies which are investing in automating their sales forces. There are companies which are now selling insurance when the guy comes to you on an iPad and sells that to you. There are companies like government organizations which I'm aware of, which are doing like the entire waste management, etc. All of those projects being done through mobile technologies, through location-based services. So I think a lot of that is happening. I'm sure you need another round of discussion on that, and possibly a more informed panel who can share more on that. I think that's the only reason why we have focused ourselves. It's more in line with what the topic is and what possibly areas of expertise for many of us out here are.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Sure, thanks.
Sridhar, my question is specific to you. Thank you for your presentation. I didn't see you commenting about the whole point of sale terminal issue, right? So is that a major impediment to your mind? Because till you have point of sale talking to mobile, you're not going to be able to track transactions that are being completed or not being completed, right? And as a marketer, then you don't know whether the investment that you're making in LBS is actually paying off or not for you. So can you tell us that more about Citibank as well as in a wider retail merchant environment?
Yeah, it's a really good point. Mobile POS is something that Citi has and a couple of other banks have as well. But the focus on that particular application has been more in terms of diverting a cash sale. So if it's a cash on delivery sale, then that's the sort of segment that this is trying to broaden, the usage of credit cards on the cash and delivery market. But you're right, once we have the mobile POS access and mobile POS data feeding in, then that gives us that much more information to target customers. So currently, that's not a route that banks have taken. But even without that to start with, the amount of physical sale that goes on, right? If you were to do a location-based activity on it, and if you were to do it cleverly at a cost that is affordable, I think the upsides are huge.
Okay, in the interest of time, we'll make this the last question for this panel. We are already 10 minutes over. Okay, it's always difficult to choose. You got one chance.
Hi, this is Varun. We spoke about location-based services and the immense potential that comes with leveraging the location-based services. And as we speak, many organizations are already tapping into that potential. But there are a lot of concerns around consumer data privacy and the trust deficit associated with it. So how do you sidestep this issue around consumer data privacy, and how do you really unleash the potential that is really holding itself back?
Who wants to go?
Yeah, I can take that. I sort of briefly alluded to that in the presentation. If you look at it, most of these apps that have location-based services, they take explicit customer consent before it's launched. So customers actually have to say yes, they're happy for them to be tracked in return for getting some really, really good offers that they want in that category that they like. So there is an explicit consent taken, and there's no sidestepping this. We don't want to violate confidentiality issues. Most responsible organizations will not do that. So just like the D&D flag on marketing mailers, this will be very much consent-based, and it will be opt-in consent rather than a default consent.
Anusha?
Yeah, just to add to what Sridhar said, from a consumer perspective, we're all aware that we're on a social platform, right? This is a public platform and we're aware, and this is something. Yes, there are fears, there are risks, there are issues and challenges to do with social media, but then we're aware and we made a conscious decision to be on a public platform, right? So there are people who are not on social platform and they're not there for, reasons to do with it. Now, this is the flip side of something that's beautiful on the other side, right? So there are challenges, and if you take Facebook, for example, and if you look at their location-based services, so you can still restrict yourself within your privacy settings out there. But if you go on to other location-based services, and if it's more public in nature, and yes, that's a choice that you need to make. And like Sridhar said, that most brands on the other side definitely handle privacy much better. While the risks to do with other kinds of threats exist, but from a brand perspective, most of them are extremely ethical in the way that they handle data that lies within them. And this is a trust that you need to kind of build with them.
Do you want to add something, Anuj?
My point of view would be slightly contrarian. I think in the world we live today, I think to me privacy is dead and extinct. And I think that's the reality. We need to embrace that reality, or, I don't know, figure out another world for ourselves.
All right, I think in the interest of time, we'll wrap up. Let's give a hand to our fellow panelists. Okay. You want to stand up?
Can I now request Professor Mehra to give away the vote of thanks, please? Hello.